Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Between the Lines. I'm John Lofton here. Oh man, I hope you're having a fantastic Sunday. I am extra excited for today's show. I really am, and I'll tell you why. Because one, my new kidney is still holding up very well, and that's exciting news. I feel great. I have very little pain. I've never felt more enthusiastic. In fact, this last week I walked 1.5 miles with my wife and son, and we had a really good time. We really did. And so I'm feeling really energetic today about today's show. So if you can't tell. So today is going to be a regular episode, not talking much about the kidneys, but I thought I'd just drop that little tidbit in. What we're going to be doing today is we're going to be talking about the Colonial Pipeline incident. Oh man, that disrupted all of gasoline down in the southern and eastern United States. And the news has really been hitting hard on, a little bit on the hack and a little bit of that, but the most have been hitting on like gas prices and stuff like that because it's the most relatable to people. But there's another side of this that I think we could all take a really big lesson to, and that is the IT part of it. So we're going to be talking about that today. If you guys have any questions or comments at all, please feel free to drop them down in the comments. And subscribe. We really need the subscribers right now. So I know it's on my main Loft in Space YouTube channel here. That's because we're still in beta, but I am working on stingers and graphics and transitions. I'm trying to do that all myself actually at this point. But yeah, it's just been one of those things because, well, I was gonna hire a firm, and well, to be somewhat transparent on why this has taken so long, I was going to hire a firm to help with those graphics because it's not necessarily a skill that I have inherited to do transitions and animations and things like that when it comes to video editing. And so I was going to have someone do that for me. Well, I got a kidney, and so all that savings that I was building up to pay for that had to go to pay bills and things like that. So I am at this point going to be attempting to learn how to do it myself because we need to get this on its own channel. Loft in Space was really meant for all of my IT and networking, which in this case kind of fits, oddly enough. But typically my shows don't always talk about IT. In fact, this is the only one I think I've ever done that has IT mentioning in and technology and networking and servers and things like that. And so I'm coming at it from that angle. But I want to catch everybody up to speed here on generally what's been going on. I'm so glad I have previews now. Again, new software update, and yeah, we're just kind of getting used to things too. The joke was I almost put Raven on air because she's my producer and my wife, more importantly, and she's looking at the comments, and so she's going to be giving me cues so that I can focus on what I'm doing and not get too distracted by looking at social media all the time, trying to make sure I don't miss anybody. So she's going to be helping out with that today. But yeah, we're going to just try to get going here. And let me give you guys a little rundown here on what essentially happened. So this entire last week, if you've been living under a rock, you probably already know about this. But I pulled a story, and this is off the Wall Street Journal. And again, I don't particularly subscribe to any one particular news source. Could be more liberal leaning, more Republican leaning. I don't really care. I like reading multiple perspectives and then make up my own dang mind. And I encourage all of my listeners to do the same. That's how we have to look at current events because everything has a slant to it. And I do my best just to give you my slant, but my slant typically tries to make the compromise between both slants and sort of in the middle. But yeah, that's kind of the idea. And then usually I start the show off with the story, but in this case, I'm going to start it off with just the basics: who, what, when, where, and why. So we're going to go ahead and go over here. So Colonial Pipeline hacker, Dark Side, which was a Russian hacking, actually now says they're going to shut down operations. But early in the week, what happened? Oh, and by the way, this made me laugh. If you probably can't see it too close, but in the red lettering on the bottom, it says 24/7 safety. Safety 24/7. Oddly enough, they didn't think about the IT safety. Well, I'm sure they did, and I'm sure that was actually a lot more to it, but it's just a little ironic. But yeah, basically the criminal group linked to a cyber attack that disrupted the gas line delivery parts of the southeastern United States hacking associates that it has, or tell hacking associates that it is shutting down. DarkSide has told associates that it's lost its access to infrastructure it was using to run its operation and will be closing. We're going to come back to that because there's a good reason for that. And we're also going to talk about how this actually probably isn't going to be the end of the DarkSide organization as we know it. Well, it is going to be the end as we know it, but they're going to probably come back later on. I'm going to talk a little bit about that later on here. And again, one quote here says that as well. And I thought, yep, they're just kind of they're going to drop off the radar for a little bit because, well, they just ticked off every single government agency in the United States, and we'll cover that more too. But basically, yeah, now it is back up and running. And I wanted to, my story today actually came from my dad. And that was, they were up in Jackson, Tennessee. And my dad lives down there and actually right on the Mississippi border. And they were up there and they needed to get some gas. They stopped by one gas station and they were just completely out. They had to go to a Phillips 66. And the first gas they tried, they only got 76 cents worth of gas before it ran out. And then they had to go up to like a mid-grade and they were finally able to fill. But yeah, the long lines and all of that, it honestly, here in Iowa, it's hard for me to gain a complete respect and perspective on exactly what happened. But in short, essentially what it meant is there was a run. People thought, oh no, we're not going to get gas anymore. There were no truckers. There were no tankers coming in. They were manually hauling trucks. I heard one report say. And so this really did damage. In recent memory, this might be one of the larger cyber attacks that actually affected U.S. infrastructure. I know there was a nuclear power plant as well that was affected. Not too long ago, actually, probably about a year or so ago, if my memory serves me correctly. But it is becoming more common, and companies are having to take serious security measures. I can tell you, the company I work for, they take their IT security very seriously, and there's a lot of rules and stuff and things I can't talk about, but I'll speak in generalities. You know, it is a little bit cumbersome. And I'm also going to show you what I do on my own network too, and how I protect myself. And even some of the vulnerabilities, even in my own software. And so we're going to be talking about that today as well. So another article that I was able to find here talks more about the ransomware and how that it is a growing threat. Because essentially they either steal, encrypt, and then otherwise block access to a machine or a server, a desktop PC, a mobile phone even. It is all possible. And so they are really rising up. And one of the things that I found interesting that's actually leading to more is companies have insurance now to cover ransomware. And you might be surprised to know this, but Colonial actually did pay the hackers nearly $5 million and to attempt to get access to their systems back. And so there's a lot of incentives for these criminal organizations to attack companies because they know that in the end they got insurance, right? They can cover this. But my thought is why would you trust someone to pay them $5 million and believe that they're actually going to give you access to your site back, or to your network and computer? That's kind of what I want to know. And in this case, it was a double extortion. They actually took 100 gigabytes of data from them, in addition to placing the locks on all of the machines and all the pipelines, or at least a portion of them, before they ended up shutting it down. And so that's where you have your Homeland Security, NSA, and pretty much every acronym and organization in the United States government agency involved, the FBI and all that. So it was a really big deal. If you haven't been completely familiar, this is a big deal. And even so much that the president got involved. And in fact, the first article, I'll go ahead and touch back on this. So the first article here talks about them shutting down. And President Biden earlier in the week had hinted at some sort of disruption to that infrastructure. Well, it appears that it happened. But what this article and what I actually believe to be true is these guys, they're professionals. In fact, this last year in their first quarter, they actually took in about $46 million from their cyber attacks. And so that to me was absolutely bonkers that you could make that much money um, by essentially holding people's computers hostage and not allowing them access to it. And that's really what we're going to be hitting hard on today is what can you do to avoid this? How could you possibly keep this from happening to you? And it's really a tough situation because there's multiple ways of doing it, and they're always inventing new ways of extortion and holding these networks for ransom. So once you figure out a technique to keep you, your employees, or your personal computer safe, there's always a new way. Okay, so before I go into my opinion and my summaries and all of that, I wanted to show you guys briefly what my network looks like. And I'm not going to show you everything. I'm not showing my firewall rules or my open ports, but I do host servers and stuff like that here locally because, well, I do this professionally as a YouTuber, and I also do video projects and AV and IT consulting. So it means I need to have a way for people to access certain files on my network remotely, whether that be VPN or whether it be a secure proxy connection to the NOS. I have multiple layers, and I'm going to give you guys a little glimpse. So many of you guys might be familiar with the company Ubiquity. They make a product called Unify. I've talked extensively, especially on this channel, about Unify, different updates and things like that. So we're going to be taking a look at that here real quick. And I think you guys are going to find this kind of interesting. So on my network, of course, I can see the basic overviews and things like that. I can see where I've had incidents and things like that. Most of these are my local network, and they're usually involving latency when one device drops from one wireless access point to another. Basically, I have different Wi-Fi things. A lot of that's local. So I don't ever really get too concerned when I look over here in my Wi-Fi metrics. Everything stays green. Everything's good. You can see, even with me going live right now, I'm barely touching my bandwidth. I'm probably only using about, well, it says 1%. I think it's a little higher than that, but streaming and all that, I'm probably using about 15 megabits of my 16 or 60 megabits per second up. But anyway, in relation to security, I have one interesting feature here. I'm going to go to my insights. I can see each device on my network. I can tell how much traffic they're using. I can see how long they've been connected for. I can see their MAC address. I have the ability to block each individual device remotely, even if I needed to. And I can do allow lists and things like that. So because I didn't want to get too technical as far as Unify specifically, every company is going to utilize something like this. If you go to your employer and you're logged into their network, they can see everything about what you're doing. In fact, I even have the device fingerprints. I have a honeypot. I've got everything I need in order to make sure that every device on my network is completely safe. In fact, my guest network requires a voucher code that's a one-time code for each individual person who wants to connect to it, because I don't leave my network open to anybody. In fact, all of my Wi-Fi networks are hidden. You need to know the exact SSID, you need to know the exact security, and you need to know the password in order to connect to my private networks. And of course, I have something called an IoT network, which I can actually talk briefly about here. So many of you guys, when it comes to personal security, probably have an Amazon device. You probably have a Google device. You probably have some sort of smart TV at this point. And really, all of those devices are susceptible. You've probably heard in the news about Amazon's privacy, if they're listening in on you and things like that. You've heard about your webcam being hacked, where hackers can see your webcam and even hear audio from your computer. And all of those things are very true. So for your smart devices, I created a special network called an IoT network, or Internet of Things network. You can call it whatever you want, but it's based on the firewall principles that network, while it can talk to the outside internet, except for certain outside countries or certain IP addresses that I have found to possibly be dangerous, and I do monitor those, it can access the outside internet, but it cannot access another device on that same network, and it cannot talk to the other networks within my main, like, corporate network, for example. And so IT companies will do the same thing. They have what are called VLANs, virtual local area networks, because many switches can have multitudes of networks even connected into the one port. It's kind of like taking a big straw and taking a bunch of little straws and putting them all inside, and having that flow. And so in the case of Colonial, I'm imagining they even have way more advanced techniques. So when you work in a data center, everything gets logged. Everything is secured, checked. They have protocols that they'll probably run at least daily. And I would venture to guess that they worked. I, I'm wondering, and I could not find a source out there that said, how they got in. I'm sure that the Homeland Security and FBI are all investigating that, and cyber crimes and those sort of things. But what I'm guessing has probably happened, and this is very common, is someone probably got an email. It looked legit. It probably even had a email that looked like it came from inside the company, and maybe they clicked a link. Maybe maybe they didn't leave their password somewhere, especially with employees working remotely because of COVID. Perhaps perhaps they had a hack get into their personal computer, and then they saved their password in an insecure way, and it allowed them to get in through that way. Who knows? I'd like to find out, because I could spend all day just talking about the different ideas and methodologies that you could probably use. But I realize most of my viewers here are not extremely technical when it comes to that. But you're more curious to see if this could happen to you or your company. And that's kind of why I'm doing this, is just to highlight that. So one area I wanted to show you guys real quick is my threat management. Right now, I have no threats. I did for a little bit. I had like 59. And I had to identify which countries they were coming from, what IP addresses, and this is an ever-going battle. I'm really happy to see green check marks here right now. So I do use a system called IPS, or intrusion prevention system, and I block certain protocols. I block different risky things that I don't use. And if it's a protocol that I don't normally use, like SSH, for example, I'll SSH in my local network, but I will never SSH remotely into my network, like through the VPN or anything. So I disable it, but it still allows me to do it locally, one local IP to another. But I found that these countries have been the most troublesome. I don't know if they're going to be troublesome, and I don't even know if the attempts to get into my network are actually originating from these countries, but they could be bouncing through them through various VPN sources and different Tors and things like that. You've probably heard the Tor browser and all of that. They have very complex ways, more ways than I want to get into right now, because I could go on forever. But you might find some of these interesting, like France and stuff like that. But of course, some of these seem obvious, like Afghanistan, China, Russia, and some of them seem kind of benevolent. But here's the thing too: I live in the United States. Most of the companies that I do business with, or that I have products with, have servers in the United States, meaning my need to have access to a more global network is not as crucial, because I can still upload to YouTube, and YouTube can send that video then out to everybody. So it doesn't really matter about that as far as distribution of content. It has more to do. I don't need someone trying to use an IP address that's originating from one of these countries to get into my network. And like I said, I'm not going to go into specifics. I'm certainly not going to show my firewall rules and all of that. Let me see if my traffic log, you have no threats. It's only going to show if there's something there. Yeah. And then my honeypot list, which is always updating. But anyway, yeah, I think that was pretty much it that I wanted to show you guys. So, but yeah, it's always a good idea. A lot of people use consumer routers and things like that aren't going to show you all these details. And I'm not suggesting that you need to go out and buy Unify or another company just to get this browser. There's actually other extensions that you can use. I think Glasswire is one that'll show you different things about your network and things like that you can use as well without like having to have a special router like I do. So just one thought to keep in mind. And so, but yeah, going back to the security there, I would imagine it's probably something simple. But I'm really curious. And if you guys know more about that than I do, or what I've been able to find out, please feel free to share in the comments and all of that too. So going on here, what can you do at your home to protect yourself and when you're online and things like that? First thing you should always do, and I can show you this on one of my websites here, and I'll go back to my second screen. So when you're using your browser, and it's going to be difficult for me to show because I know I cropped this out a little bit, but in the top left-hand corner, you click on little padlock, and I have mine cropped out because you guys don't need to see my address bar and that most of the time, but in this case, I wish you could, and I don't have time to recrop it right in here on the fly, but it'll say connection is secure, and it'll be green. Most people are using Google Chrome at this point, but Microsoft Edge will do the same thing, and so will Firefox. So that's something to keep in mind. Always look for that check mark or that padlock in the top left-hand corner right next to your address bar. Make sure you're actually on a secure what's called an SSL connection, or secure server link connection. The other thing is, make sure you're only buying stuff and putting your credit card information in reputable sources. Okay, you probably heard that before. And I'll just reiterate one other thing that you probably heard before. Use a different password for every single website. And if the website offers any kind of two-factor authentication, sometimes called 2FA, utilize it. Because even Ubiquiti, in recent news, has had issues where there has been security vulnerabilities. I still can't get good information as to if any data was accessed, if they were able to infiltrate any of the servers. But basically what they instructed us to do is, of course, change our password and reset our two-factor authentication so that we get another security key. And you can use an app like Microsoft Authenticator. If you also use LastPass like I do for all your password management, I'd recommend that as well, because your master password gets saved locally, not on any server. So it's impossible, even if they were to hack a LastPass server, for them to gain access to the master password. That is something that you and you alone have. Don't lose it. It's a pain in the butt to have to reset that. Ask me how I know. But it is a good service because that allows you to save all of your important passwords and secure information in one place, so that it autofills on the websites that you need it to. And that keeps you secure. And then your two-factor authentication, you can also use a similar app like that. I think Google Passwords has one too, for the two-factor authentication. Or sometimes it's just a text message. You guys have probably seen those. Please enter this code to verify your account or something like that. And always do that. Any website that offers it, do it. Because even if they got access to the account and the password, they would have access to your actual local device that you're sending your two-factor authentication token to. So that without that, they would not be able to access it. And that's all in theoretics. I don't know if there's a loophole around it. To my knowledge, it is the most secure way to keep your information private in an online place. So really recommend doing that. Now, for my companies out there, I'll talk briefly here to you guys. So there are multiple tools that you can use to help your employees. Obviously, reiterate everything that I just said about using different passwords. Make them change their password every 90 days. And to my listeners who don't have companies, you probably are really annoyed that I just said that. And I'm sorry, but it is for your own protection. It's for the company's protection. It is vital because if the passwords are changing, if they got wind of some old data and the password's since been changed, then it's kind of a moot point. Now, and then obviously check your email. You want to make sure that your email has a valid email address, at your company's domain. And honestly, to my employers, there are different things you can do within Microsoft Exchange to identify subjects that come from external source, and you can have it put a marker on there. You can also install add-ins for your employees if you guys are all using like Microsoft 365, that allows them to report suspected phishing attempts. So trying to get them to click on a link and get them encouraged to do that. Those things are really important. I do not have costs or anything like that, what an add-in like that would be, but if you got an IT professional that you guys work with, I encourage you to utilize them, because they're going to give you the best suggestions that are most up to date and practical for your installation for your office network. Finally, you can set up dummy emails. Like, you can actually write your own phishing email and give little subtle clues, because it's not going to be as simple as, oh, bad grammar and all of that. It's going to look legit. And when you send that out, and if you have that add-in that says like report phishing, it'll actually say, good job, you passed, if they correctly detect. And if they don't, and if they click on the link in there, it'll take them to a page that says, please be aware of our company's security policy. This was a phishing attempt. And so those things I find are really helpful to use. So make sure you're utilizing tools like that. Make sure you're looking at your own corporate network. If you're not familiar with it, if you don't have necessarily a dedicated IT person, well, one, I'm available. I have a company that does those sort of things. But also, if you guys have another one that you work with, please feel free to reach out to them, because it's more cost effective, obviously, to do more security measures on your network while you haven't been hacked. Because believe me, there are people trying. On my own website, since it's been up for about 3 years now, I've had nearly 50,000 attempts at malicious logins on my website. And it's hosted with a secure provider, and I'm thankful for that, because it catches it. But it will happen. It is just a matter of time. Everyone here watching this, it could be the Colonial Pipeline. It could be the mom and pop business down the road selling, baked goods. It can happen to anybody. Be vigilant. Some companies even have policies where if it's not a company issued USB drive, if it doesn't have I think there's even authentication keys you can put on them. So if it's not, it will not allow a company issued computer to register that device. I encourage you to investigate stuff like that and those sort of resources. But those are possible, and that keeps insecure files from getting into the network to be able to infiltrate it. In fact, some companies just outright no. If it's on a USB drive, it's not. You can't plug in USB drives to our computers. Plain and simple. And I think that might be the best policy, and obviously the most cost effective too. But I really would encourage that. So my time is getting somewhat low here. Doesn't look like we have any comments or suggestions at this point, but well, this video gets posted live. So if you guys are watching this, of course, after the live stream, please feel free to comment, and I will get back to as many of you guys as I can. This was an interesting show for me, and I took it kind of personally because it affected so many people, and the hackers behind it had some serious capital. And I would also encourage everybody, in my own personal opinion, don't pay hackers. I know it seems tempting, but you don't know what they're going to do with that millions or thousands of dollars, or even just hundreds of dollars. If they're immoral enough to try to, steal your information and hack your network, what makes you think they're going to be honest if you pay them? I know that's kind of their business, but they don't really have an incentive to actually turn it back on. If you're paying them, you're just like giving in and saying, here's my money. So I don't encourage that. It is a terrible situation. I'm thankful that I haven't had any ransomware on my personal computer. I have had viruses and stuff like that before that have messed it up pretty bad, but thankfully I've been able to remove them. But yeah, so we have 1 minute left in our show here today, and I kind of ran out of material a little bit. So imagine that. I actually ran out of stuff to say because I got through all my points. But anyway, well, it has been an absolute pleasure. I guess I'll just talk briefly about the new site. We are building a new site for this show as well, just to kind of hub everything together. We're looking at registering for different podcasts, like on iTunes and Spotify, things like that. And hopefully we can get that going here sooner than later. I know I've been teasing it for a long time. But until then, we will just kind of keep waiting here. And I'm working. Trust me, guys, I'm working on it. And I really value you guys' feedback. So please don't hold back. Even if it's just, hey, it sounded good, or Odie, you sound terrible, or quit mumbling sometimes. You get off focus, blah, blah, blah. All right. Well, I'm going to let you guys go. This is John Lofton here for Between the Lines. Make sure to like and subscribe. We will see you guys next Sunday. Same time, same place. Between the Lines.